Hello, guys. Welcome inside Take to Take here. Patrick Tallon, as always, joined alongside Luke Burrows, Nick Robinson. Tons of stuff to get into today. Action-packed week. A lot of drama this week, more so than usual, and I can't wait to get into it. But before we do, Luke, Nick, how are we doing on this Thursday afternoon?
Very good, Pat. It's almost Valentine's Day.
It is almost Valentine's Day.
Yeah, I'm doing good, Pat. How are you doing?
Fantastic. Happy to be recording. And if there's a time to record, it's right now because this week a lot of news happened. And I think it was Tuesday when all the news kind of broke at once with Columbus, all the chaos happening, the stuff happening in Pittsburgh, a lot of COVID stuff. We're going to get all into that. But let's start with some drama. Let's talk about the chaos that's happening in Columbus. So that was Laine's second? It was Patrick Laine's second or third game, and he apparently disrespected an assistant coach, and then he was benched for the final 25 minutes of the game. And we saw the screenshots on Twitter of Patrick Laine just sitting there with his ice time, and everyone's thinking, great, this is just Pierre-Luc Dubois all over again. What's going on? So apparently he disrespected a coach. They had a talk about it the next day. Tortorella said, hey, I think you guys read way too much into this. You're making it a bigger deal than it needs to be. They spoke at the next practice, and everything seems to be fine. They're putting it behind them. But if you're a newly acquired player, you're on your I think it was his second game, second or third, whatever. If you're playing that soon and something like that already happens, you're disrespecting a coach, you're being benched for 25 minutes. That's not a good look. Nick, what do you think of this entire situation?
Yeah, well, Patrick Laine is a bit of a brash character, and we always knew that. I always like to think back towards when he pretty much roasted the entire Vancouver Canucks team. I think it was either them or the Oilers about playing Fortnite a
It
couple of
was
years ago.
Vancouver, yeah.
Yeah, it was Vancouver, and then he had a really off year after that. But he's a pretty brash character. Obviously, not afraid to say anything to the media. So I'm sure he's not afraid to say anything to somebody like his coaches, even if he is a newly acquired player. Maybe Tortorella is right in some respect. Maybe we are reading into it too much just because it's a simple disciplinary thing. But obviously, given the history, the really recent history of what's happened with Tortorella, what's happened with Laine in Winnipeg, people are going to read a lot into this because it's not a good sign just a couple of games in that he's already being sat for half of a game.
Well, I agree. And I think a lot of the drama from this situation is coming from the fact that all the fans saw was Laine has been benched. What's going on? And then it just gets totally blown out of proportion. I think, and I wouldn't expect Tortorella to come out and explain exactly why he was benched, but it eventually did get out. And to me, that kind of made a lot more sense that, okay, it's not just something up with his play or Tortorella isn't liking something he's doing. But disrespecting one of your coaches is a very valid reason to be benched. So it kind of makes more sense there. And I understand where all the drama came from because everyone was almost expecting it after seeing a character like Laine get traded to a coach like Tortorella. Yeah, you could probably see it coming, but I think it's a good thing that it wasn't immediately because of his play. Obviously, it's an unfortunate situation to disrespect your coach, but it kind of makes more sense in that way.
It's weird to to think that it's because I agree with what you said, Luke, how it's almost good that it's not because of his play. But at the same time, this quickly, you're disrespecting your coach. I don't know what he said. We don't know what he said. Maybe it was just a gesture. Maybe it was something completely out of the ordinary. But that's game two. And this is a really weird situation because we saw Pierre-Luc Dubois, who is probably a better all-around player than Patrick Laine, but still struggled defensively, struggled a lot under John Tortorella. Then you have someone who is basically epitomized as a one-dimensional player in Laine, and he's already getting benched. I think this is going to be very tough for these two. We already saw Domi was moved to third line left wing rather quickly. He's been benched a couple of times. I'm curious to see at a certain point if Columbus just kind of stops playing for him. That happens a lot. It happened with Montreal when they fired Michel Therrien. Happened with the Leafs when Babcock was when he was there last year. A lot of unfortunate stuff happened. So I'm just curious to see, is Nashville going to implode soon? How much is it on Tortorella? How much is it on the players? You also have to look at Jarmo Kekalainen. Obviously, he made some questionable drafting decisions. I don't remember who it was that tweeted it, but said that every single year there's a team with a lot of drama, and this year it's the Columbus Blue Jackets. Do you guys think that at any point Tortorella could get fired? People are talking about maybe even Laine doesn't finish out his contract in Columbus because he has one. I think he's one more year before being an RFA. Like, it's a really interesting scenario, and I'm just curious if you guys think at a certain point will players have enough of John Tortorella, and do you guys think it's more on Tortorella or it's more on the players?
I think Tortorella is going to be the person that's eventually out at some point. It just seems like it's headed that way. And I also saw a tweet that really, made sense of the whole Columbus situation for me, because you got to look at it. Jarmo Kekalainen's brought in Max Domi and Patrick Laine this summer in hopes of boosting his offense. Obviously, those are two good moves if you want to do that, because these are, very efficient offensive players. But John Tortorella, clearly what we saw last year, was able to turn the Columbus Blue Jackets into a defensive powerhouse, and they played some of the best shutdown hockey in the entire NHL last year. So there's almost maybe some sort of a difference in philosophy between Kekalainen and Tortorella, whereas Kekalainen wants them to score more. Tortorella's happy to have these offensive players, but he wants them to play defense too, which is really something that we all know that Max Domi and Patrick Laine really don't do a heck of a lot of. So on that basis, just where it looks like Kekalainen wants to take this team, I wouldn't be surprised if, whether it be this season or after the season, if Tortorella is eventually moved out in favor of somebody who's more aligned with Kekalainen's plan.
And I think like Tortorella is a really, wherever he goes, it kind of brings up an interesting situation. I think everyone's kind of seen that. But I think he's kind of established himself. No, he's definitely established himself as a good coach, one of the best in the league at times. So I think the question is more, the question isn't, is he a good coach? Is he the right coach for Columbus? And we've seen a lot of ups and downs in Columbus. But then you see him in Vancouver, definitely not the right coach there. That just didn't go well. But I agree with Nick. I think at some point it's, instead of kind of driving, I don't want to say Dubois was driven out of town, but he it sort of was.
Yeah.
Whether it was his own doing or not. But yeah, at some point you kind of have to discuss, is Tortorella maybe not the right fit here? And yeah, I don't know when that would happen, but I think there needs to be emphasis on the fit, not necessarily is he a good or bad coach, because he definitely is a good coach.
That's what I was going to ask you guys. And I know Luke now thinks he's a good coach. Nick, are you big on John Tortorella? This seems to be a thing. Look, I don't really remember. I remember just the funny interviews when he was in New York. I briefly remember him in Vancouver. He's a guy that everyone says he expects the best out of his players, and he demands the best, and he doesn't pick favorites. If you're playing poorly, you're benched. He'll call you on your shit. Like, that's just how it is. Do you guys, and well, we got Luke's, but Nick, do you think he's a good coach? Do you think he's the right coach? Because I think it's both. I think being a good coach is also being the right coach, right?
Right.
Is it not? Are those not?
I sort of lumped Tortorella in with some of the other coaches that were really successful in the 2000s and just haven't had that much success since. I think of Tortorella in the same way that I do somebody like Paul Maurice or Peter Laviolette. These are guys that had success of varying degrees in the 2000s, but really haven't won anything notable since that. Although they've come close at times, it's just, I don't know, like Tortorella adapted last year. And for the first time last year, I think I really noticed how good of a coach Tortorella was, because he was able to turn Columbus into such a hardworking defensive team to the point where they beat the Toronto Maple Leafs in the play-in qualification, and then pretty much gave Tampa all they could handle last year again. So I think he's a okay coach on that basis, but at some point we have to consider them, Tortorella and so many of these other coaches are just something of the same. They are being rotated throughout the league. Mm-hmm. They're all probably going to get jobs after their current jobs. Mm-hmm. Tortorella is definitely going to get another job after Columbus if it ends. And, maybe it's just time that the league, and we've talked about it before, it just starts to look for other candidates, because a lot of these guys like Tortorella just haven't won anything in a long time, and they're pretty much surviving off of being a known commodity at this point.
Yeah, and look, Tortorella is a good person. There are tons of stories of personal things he's done that have been really great, but I just think I think he'd be much more likable if he cut back on attacking the media. when they lost to Tampa in, what was it, 5 games? I don't remember, but he said, guys, I'm not here to talk about the moral victories. It's like, you know what? That was a perfect opportunity to applaud your team for what they did. And I feel like if he kind of got rid of that stuff and had more of a positive approach, he'd be one of the better coaches in the league. It's just finding that balance. But more on the Columbus stuff, Mikko Koivu unexpectedly retired. This one just came out of nowhere. He said, this was not an easy decision for me, as I have loved every minute of my short time in Columbus, and I really hope to be able to help this team accomplish its goals this season. But the bottom line is I haven't been able to get to the level of play I need to be true to myself and fair to my teammates. So the time is right for me to retire from hockey. His underlying numbers weren't great. He doesn't really generate much offense. He's a fourth line center who still had some decent defensive numbers. If the decision is what he says it was, which is just to get away from hockey, then that's a perfectly respectable decision. He's had a fantastic career. But again, this happening at the same time as the line A benching had people thinking that, you know what, maybe there's just a lot of chaos there. Maybe there's a lot of drama. Maybe he just wants out and he's done for now. Either way, what do you guys think of this? Kind of unexpected for you guys?
Yeah. And I think purely based on speculation, obviously, I can't see it really having anything to do with the whole Tortorella thing. He's an older guy. Everyone's playing in such a weird season right now. And he comes in and he hasn't had the start he's wanted. I'm sure it's just a number of things saying, and I bet making the decision to go to Columbus probably wasn't an easy one anyways. Just from my standpoint, you kind of think, oh, I wish he just retired with Minnesota then. And to speak to the Tortorella issue, you'd have to think that the older guys, kind of like the veterans of the league, kind of understand. You would assume they understand Tortorella's style a bit more, and you'd think Tortorella would kind of return that favor, having some mutual respect there. So I couldn't see anything being there. I really think it's just he's come into a new city in the middle of a pandemic and hasn't had the start he's wanted, and he's just thinking, it's not what he wants to be doing right now. So like I said, I kind of would have liked to see him finish with Minnesota, but
yeah, it's probably unrelated in the end, but it doesn't distract. It's like the Ottawa Senators a few years ago. There are overlying stories, but then just sort of any other little ripple really seems like it's just piling on top at that point. And I feel like it's the same way right now with Columbus. Yep. His play had fallen off quite a bit, but good on him to recognize that he wasn't simply up to his standard, and rather than just try and push through it, he really doesn't have anything left to prove at this juncture of his career. I feel like if all players sort of had this honesty of just owning up and retiring after they were past it, I feel like there'd be quite a few contracts in the NHL that are considered bad, not currently signed or anything like that. Yeah. So, respect for Mikko Koivu for recognizing that and stepping away.
Yep. Let's move on to some other news. Let's get away from this the drama that is the Columbus Blue Jackets. That is Ron Hextall is the new GM of the Pittsburgh Penguins, and Brian Burke as well, serving as, I cannot remember. It wasn't president, was it? It was president. Was it president? It was. Okay, yeah. So Rexall as the new GM of the Pittsburgh Penguins and Brian Burke as president. We knew this. I think they weren't going to hire some new GM who wasn't as experienced. When you have Crosby and Malkin and Chris Letang, and you've won 3 cups in the span of 5 years, however long it was, you're not going to hire in someone else. You want someone with experience. I looked at the history of Ron Hextall's trades. He's made some pretty good trades, nothing alarming, nothing where he was really fleeced. He seems like a good GM for the most part. Brian Burke, again, this was kind of surprising. I had a feeling he was mostly going to stick with the media. But as a president, I don't know, Burke has made as a GM, he's made some questionable moves in the past. He's been rather aggressive with the media. Nick, you tweeted the video of the Pittsburgh model. The Pittsburgh model, my ass, it still cracks me up. But as far as Hextall goes, I think this is the right move. I'd be hard pressed to look at the other candidates and say that they were better options. Pierre Maguire was one that was thrown around. Nick, I'll direct this to you. What do you think of Rexall? Mostly, we'll touch on Rexall, but Hextall, sorry, of Hextall coming in and then Burke on the side. What do you make of this?
Yeah, all you pretty much have to do to evaluate Ron Hextall if you're in Pittsburgh is pretty much look across the pond and what he's done in Philadelphia. Philadelphia is a really good, solid team right now. And while Chuck Fletcher's been at the helm there for a couple of years, all these players these young guys that are breaking through were all players that were acquired and drafted under Hextall. So I think the Flyers really aren't today what they are, if not for Ron Hextall. And I think that is really what appealed to Pittsburgh, just seeing how he was able to take, it was a decently aging core there of Voracek, Giroux, and the like. And he was able to add this nice young layer of talent, which I think is something that Pittsburgh is going to try and replicate pretty quickly. He was fired because there was a little disagreement. It felt like he wanted to be more patient with the Flyers. Whereas as soon as Chuck Fletcher came in, up came Carter Hart, and the future was sort of now in Philadelphia. So it's going to be interesting to see how he goes about doing this in Pittsburgh right now, because, there is pressure to win here and now while you still have Crosby and Malkin. Brian Burke for me is the more interesting wild card in all of this, because how much control is he going to have in terms of player acquisition? Because then you're going to look at acquiring some more truculent players, sort of what he has always favored. And, we know how that's succeeded in the past. Really hasn't since Anaheim in 2007. So to me, the wild card here is how much control does Brian Burke have, and how much patience is Ron Hextall going to have in building this team right now?
Yeah, I think I don't have too much to say on Hextall, but and I think most people kind of saw that coming. Like that was sort of leaked a few days prior. Hextall is going to be named, but I don't think anyone really saw Brian Burke.
Yeah, that was weird.
Being named president of hockey ops, and I like Nick said, it's going to be interesting to see how involved he can get, because at least I wasn't really expecting him to kind of get back into the upper management scene, at least. Like I don't know how long he's been at Sportsnet now, a few years, but that's really surprising. So that's going to be kind of neat to see him back in the game. And I mean, I don't know if we want to touch on this, but on the flip side, it'll be interesting to see what kind of moves happen on the company he's leaving at Sportsnet. So it'll be an interesting transition for sure.
You don't have any insider info for us?
No, I don't. It'll be it'll be different not having to see Brian Burke at work anymore. So
is it effective? Like, will he have any more?
I have no idea.
It was effective immediately. No, okay.
I'm not sure. I work in a few days, so I don't know if I'll see him.
If he's
there, I'm sure the Pittsburgh Penguins aren't going to let him ride out any appearances. Talking about other teams that are now their opponents, I'm sure he's off to Pittsburgh pretty immediately. But Luke, that is an interesting point. What Sportsnet's going to do. I know we sort of briefly discussed it away from the show, but Cassie Campbell-Pascal seems like an obvious one to throw in there. I know Anson Carter was on last night during the Montreal-Toronto broadcast.
I thought he was great last night.
He is good. He's done a good job in the past for NBC. So, just as interesting is the route that Sportsnet's going to go after Burke.
Yeah, exactly. And I liked him. I know he's he always used the words truculent and big ugly hockey and all that stuff, but I like him as an analyst. I think he's funny. I think he's unintentional comedic relief, and I think he was an entertaining to watch. And I actually bought it.
And clearly well liked by some of his colleagues at Sportsnet.
Yeah.
A lot of funny jokes when he got hired. But anyway, it's interesting to see what Pittsburgh's going to do, because you can still ride out this core, but at the same time, you have to recoup some assets. You have to get more picks. You have to get better prospects. You have Samuel Poulin, and that's basically it as far as blue chippers go, but he has yet to play multiple games in the NHL. So it's really interesting to see. I hope they kind of do a mix of both, still ride out this window, but also you got to get younger.
Well, you kind of have to. Like we've talked about it a million times, but you don't really have a choice when you have Crosby and Malkin. So
exactly. And of those three, who you move, if any, you want to avoid that. And then that ties into the whole rumor that Rutherford allegedly had to move around Letang. This is just a rumor that we talked about, but he was told no, and he didn't want to be a part of a team that he didn't have full control of. But at the same time, you got to be very careful if you're moving Chris Letang. You have no one else to help. You have Mike Matheson on that brutal deal. So anyway, it'll be interesting to see, and I'm excited to see what he does. And hopefully, because I love Crosby, hopefully he gets a couple more cups in him. But yeah, all right. In other NHL news, more unfortunate news, there have been COVID protocol delays everywhere, all over the league, every day, every other day. Mostly been in the States. We got the first one today. Actually, between Edmonton and Montreal, there was word that it would be pushed till about 8 p.m. Elliot Friedman said that they're delayed pending test results as a result of Edmonton Oilers player entering the league's COVID protocol earlier today. The league announced a change to the start time of their game against the Canadiens tonight. I've seen a couple reporters say that they think it's Puljujarvi. Again, we're not really sure. I guess that means he would have had the morning skate with his team if he was exposed to COVID. But again, I feel like there's not a lot of transparency. There's enough transparency, but not enough to really fully understand what's happening.
Yeah, because we don't even know if he was exposed to COVID, right? It could just simply mean he was somewhere he wasn't supposed to be, as we saw with the Capitals. Like, we just don't know anymore.
Yeah, and there have been false negatives, false positives. It seemed like a big issue in the States: Minnesota, Colorado, St. Louis. All
so
those
many
teams.
A lot, yeah.
Especially those teams in Canada seem to be doing a pretty good job. And we didn't really know what restrictions. We knew that they were allowed to go to the grocery store. We knew that they were allowed to do, basic things, but it's who's taking it seriously and who isn't. And I'm not going to point fingers at anyone and suggest that anyone isn't, but it's getting to a point where you might even have to look like, and this is a suggestion, but you might even have to look like just having the American leagues, or at least divisions, suspend play for a full week to figure everything out, reevaluate, make sure they have the right protocols in order before going back. And the Canadian team should have stricter regulations, make sure they're doing the best they can. But this has people worried about potentially the season ending or getting cut or anything like that. Will anyone have a full season? What do you guys think of this?
Like a full 56?
56.
I think that's kind of the thing. I don't think it'll ever be fully canceled this season, because you've seen the MLB went through with it, the NFL went through with it, all these other leagues that had issues at some point. I do think it could get to a point where there's postponements and cancellations and everything, where the integrity of the season just starts falling apart, and it gets to a point where I felt, I'm not a huge baseball fan, but I felt at certain points in the MLB season, it got to a point where it's just like, okay, we need to just finish this season and just get it done. I hope the NHL doesn't get to that point, but I feel like that's kind of worst case scenario. Again, I just can't see them canceling it after starting it. I don't think that would be an option, but I think it could get pretty bad. And yeah, you're right, Pat, it's already not looking good. So I think that would be worst case. It just gets so bad that, maybe some teams only play 52 or 48 games this season. Who knows? But I don't think the season's in jeopardy. I think a lot of the integrity of the season is, for sure.
Yeah, we saw worse situations, MLB, NFL, who were allowing fans. And it's like there were so many COVID cases. The NHL's done okay. But again, there were some irregularities or like difficulties with the regulations. You had the COVID protocol in the hotel room. You can't be in the same room, but you can be in the lounge together. That didn't make sense, but they were the rules and you have to follow them. So I'm just curious to see, if Puljujarvi might have COVID, if this is actually positive, well, then everyone else he skated with, they're also at risk. If they were at the Bell Center staff could be at risk. Montreal players could be at risk. And I thought the Canadian division was doing an excellent job so far, but again, we're awaiting more news.
One player, right?
Exactly.
And that's really it. And I think the one thing that is increasingly becoming a concern here is that a couple of officials tested positive this week, and therefore that's now giving light to the possibility of on-ice transmission of COVID-19 being a thing, which really I certainly didn't consider before, because I thought, things were just happening fast enough on the ice where it wasn't really an issue. But, that shows you why I'm not a disease expert. And, it is a thing now. It's something that we do have to be careful with, because there really is no way to protect every single person on the ice except for simply not play the games. And we know that's not an option right now. That's what makes it seem like, at least for the teams playing out in the United States, that a full 56 games really just isn't going to be a possibility. And they're going to have to look at something like a points percentage basis, or just agree on a hard line to where to cut the season. Because I think right now, even St. Louis and Arizona are playing each other 7 times in a row. Like it's a mess right now. I was hopeful that Canada would keep it together. They seemingly are. Today's a bit of a scare. We'll see what happens with Edmonton and whatever player is involved in that. But I think Canada is more likely to get that 56 game season. But I think the United States teams are going to have to some point accept the fact that, a bubble is probably the only way to safely play this season.
Yeah.
Well, that kind of ties into standings because some teams have played so many more games than other teams. You look at New Jersey, they're sitting at nine games played, whereas Philly has played 13. You look in the Discover Central Division. It sounds so weird saying that. But Chicago's played 14 games and Florida's played 10. Basically, all the divisions except for the Canadian
the lead wide discrepancy is Vancouver 16, New Jersey 9. Like that's crazy.
And Pierre LeBrun tweeted a couple times. He said, guys, I would suggest you guys start looking at points percentage to use the standings. This makes sense. If I hit points percentage for the North Division, I'm not calling it the Scotia North Division. Winnipeg, who's fourth, they jump Edmonton. Edmonton goes down to third if you were doing it by points, because that's just how it makes sense. And it makes sense. If people don't have the same amount of games played, it makes a lot of sense. You go to, let's do it.
And that's what they did last year when they were seeding for the playoffs. Because that's what moved Vancouver from wild card into third, was going off points. So it's obviously the smart thing to do. And I think they realize that.
Exactly. And you do it for the East Division, Pittsburgh, which is now fifth. You do points percentage, they're now second last in the division. So that's how it should be. Games are scattered. Colorado hasn't played in feels like about a week. So
and that is really messing with my fantasy team, and I don't appreciate that.
Oh yeah. Good thing Luke traded away Cale Makar. He was playing a long game. He knew he wouldn't.
I also have Makar. I've got Taves and Burakovsky. So
should have traded them.
I need the Avs on the ice.
Should have traded Landeskog to Luke back when he was begging for him. Anyway, in more unfortunate news, Bell, let's talk. That's been a thing. I don't even know how long that campaign has been around, but out of the blue, TSN 1040, which is Vancouver, 1150, which is Hamilton, and 1290, which is Winnipeg, just went off air. There was some automated message saying that it will be discontinued, and then they ended it by playing
Good Riddance
by Green Day. And this is really upsetting news. We're not on official radio, but we love recording and all this stuff. And then seeing this, and it was really bad because we saw workers at all of these radio stations say, "Oh, I just tuned into Twitter. Turns out I don't have a job anymore." There wasn't notice for a lot of these workers. There wasn't a heads up. They didn't know there'd be cuts. Bell, with everything that came forward, Dan O'Toole, Natasha, I'm going to mess up this name.
Stanisowski.
There we go. Christian Jack, a bunch of other people from TSN have been laid off. It's just really unfortunate. This is weeks after the Bell Let's Talk campaign. Bell took something with the wage subsidies, but they were given a bunch of pandemic money, and I don't know the logistics of it, but this is really unfortunate, and this is a really bad look for Bell, and they don't care. And now a lot of really talented people are out of work as a result. I think we knew the pandemic would lead to job loss. I didn't think it'd be this sudden. I didn't think $1 billion,
especially for a company that has remained profitable throughout the pandemic.
Yeah, exactly. So what do you guys make of this situation? What do you think?
Well, obviously it's unfortunate. A lot of really good people lost their jobs. Vancouver and 1040 have been a massive part of that city. And, there's a lot of talented people there working in, we focused on hockey on the show. So I'll say on the hockey side, there have been some really talented people that have come through there and that have been working there currently. And, beyond that, people outside of hockey, there are some really good people that have lost their jobs in markets like Hamilton and Winnipeg. And it's just really unfortunate to see everything. Like I said, Bell has remained profitable throughout the pandemic. They're one of the few industries that has not taken a ginormous hit throughout this thing. And, to see that they still felt the need to lay off so many people in the fashion that they have, I think is the most disgusting part about it. Just, like you said, Pat, people showing up on Twitter in the middle of the afternoon, just finding out they all of a sudden don't have a job anymore and that their station went off the air. I think that's a bit of a slap in the face if you are an employee of TSN. So the whole thing's really hard, and it's hard seeing so many talented people without jobs. And we knew the industry was going to be affected in some way, but you didn't expect it a week after Bell Let's Talk and
Yeah.
all the good publicity that Bell gets from that initiative, to just all of a sudden sort of sneak in all these layoffs. It's pretty shocking.
Yeah, and we'll get into Bell Let's Talk in a second. And Luke, I'll get your thoughts just real quick. I have it here. Bell's shares went up. This is as of February 5th, 2.75% last week. Stock prices were obviously high, but they were not high necessarily because of like regular investments. They had 120 million in wage subsidies from the federal government. Their CEO makes $10 million a year. That's 400 times more than most people in this country earn. This is corporate welfare at its finest. This is really unfortunate. A company that has so much money doing this. And Luke, we'll get your thoughts, and then we'll jump back into the Bell Let's Talk and sort of what that means.
Well, yeah, like it sucks. I honestly don't have that much to say because what has happened is just so blatant how bad it is. The way it was handled, the effects it's having on just the sport media landscape in the country. And I feel like, I don't know, maybe it's just because it's probably because I'm just more tuned into this stuff over the past few years, but I feel like this is happening quite a bit. I'm a Canucks fan, but I don't listen to TSN 1040 consistently. I will if, someone specific is going on, but that station meant a lot to Vancouver. No disrespect to Sportsnet 650. But like TSN 1040 had a lot of just quality people reporting on hockey, and it's just, I don't know, for them to just shut it down just like that is, I want to say short-sighted, but I'm not at all in the loop about what's going on there. So it's hard to say. And then the television personalities as well. Like I don't watch soccer. Maybe Nick can speak to this more, but Christian Jack, like I don't watch soccer, and I know how big Christian Jack is for soccer in this country.
That's one of the people helping grow the game in this country the most, especially on television. He's been exponential and such a big part of that.
So I just don't get it. And I don't expect myself to get it because there's just so much business going on here that we're not a part of, but it's just a terrible situation. And
there's no reason they couldn't have afforded to keep these. Maybe minor cutbacks, but that's $103 million from the government. That's the government keeping you afloat. More than afloat, actually. And it's really unfortunate. But let's talk about Bell Let's Talk. And I'm not just saying this, and I don't want this to come across in a rude way, but I'll say it anyway. I thought the campaign was kind of silly. I'm all for all the money going to mental health research. I'm all for people reaching out. I'm all for people sharing their experiences. I'm all for easier access to these resources that are so important. And I'm happy that there's less of a stigma around mental health, because there really shouldn't be a stigma. But every year this has happened, there have been more and more people who are working for Bell, and even before the layoff, speaking out and saying, you know what, I worked for Bell. I was forced to work when I wasn't able to, when I was sick, when I was pregnant. They don't give you mental health days. They don't give you a fair wage. And a lot of Bell employees speaking out saying, this is the biggest joke I've seen, because I work for the company. I know who I work for, and I know how the company actually treats its employees. That being said, the money they raise, it's always a lot. It's very easy to do a hashtag. It's very important that money goes towards that. But I think this, this could be the last year Bell Let's Talk, or next year when they put the hashtag out again, you could see people saying, you know what, I'm not gonna do it, because this is a garbage company that have treated its employees poorly, that have laid off a lot of people. And I'm just curious what you guys think of that, how these layoffs tie into the whole Bell Let's Talk campaign. And am I wrong for saying that? Do you guys think?
No, I don't think you're wrong. And I had somebody raise that with me, actually, just sort of maybe the ethics almost behind corporate labeling something like a Let's Talk Day, something that's supposed to be all about raising awareness for mental health, raising money for mental health, and slapping, a label like Bell on it. And I actually had never thought of that until this year. And I didn't really, think too much of it when it was first brought to my attention. But after seeing it now, you sort of realize, talking about mental health and, raising money for mental health should be something that we're always doing. We shouldn't just have to do it on one certain day when a company like Bell steps up and says that they're going to start matching donations. The stigma around mental health and people's well-being should be conversations and something that we're talking about all the time, and not just really focusing and narrowing it down to one day like that.
It doesn't
and
need to be
allowing
a
a company like Bell to just gain all this, good public image out of it. So I don't disagree with you entirely on that, Pat.
No, I understand. Like, it's a tricky thing, because obviously those are discussions that need to be happening in the world, really. And it's a tough idea to talk about, that Bell is promoting it in that way, because I mean, it's a real sticky situation. But when it comes down to it, Bell is a company. Bell is a company that makes money, and they're I mean, you can make the argument that they're branding a discussion about mental health, and it's just not the way it should happen.
And $7.7 million in 2020. I can't find the 2021 number, but that's a lot of money. It's very easy. And that's the thing is, once a year, it's easy for us to grab our phones, tweet a couple hashtags, retweet, whatever. But that's the lowest amount. There's not a penny anymore. So the second lowest amount is 5 cents that they're going to donate. You don't see their CEO, you don't see their anyone who's higher up in Bell talking about it on any other day. It's one day a year. It's publicity. It's pandemic money. It's nothing. And I think, mental health should be every day of the year. People should talk about that when they need to, when they can, and it should be accessible, and the money helps. But I'm not going to think for 2 seconds, and I never thought for a second, even before this, that Bell actually cared about mental health, and I don't think they do, and it's clear they don't. When they made all these layoffs in such a unprofessional way. So let's move on from that, and obviously our thoughts are with everyone who's been affected. Dan O'Toole had a couple good tweets saying, "Hey, let's talk about it. I'm laid off after this long," and Jay Onright had a really nice tribute to Dan, and for, I'm assuming, the three of us, that was our childhood growing up and watching those two on SportsCenter. So anyway, let's touch on our teams before we wrap up the show here. And I'm going to start with Montreal because I'm in a bit of a mood. They played Ottawa twice, and they played Toronto last night. I would say, and Nick, I'll get your thoughts first because you're the resident Sens fan here. But I thought the first game against Ottawa, Montreal outplayed Ottawa, but Ottawa won. And then in the second game, I thought Ottawa way outplayed Montreal, and then Montreal came up with the win. Montreal has a hard time with bad teams. Detroit swept them 4 times. Season sweep last year, 4 games. Montreal struggles against bad teams. No offense, Nick. And man, I said before the game, I'm worried about playing Ottawa. Of all the teams I'm worried about playing, it's Ottawa. And those were the most exhausting games of hockey I've ever seen. What did you think of those 2 games? You probably loved it for both games.
Yeah, well, you know what? We can tie in pretty much all I wanted to talk about with Ottawa into this conversation too, this first little bit. I'm sure you would have been okay playing Ottawa in the state they were when they made that trip down into Vancouver with the team they were fielding there. But I think they sort of learned after when they came home that a lot of these veterans can't be in the lineup. They took Paquette out. They put Eric Brandstrom in. That was a massive improvement. They're playing Galchenyuk more. And all of a sudden, you looked at that first game against Montreal. Tim Stützle took over, and all of a sudden, the Senators were fun to watch. It was kind of unbelievable. And then, especially in that second game, they did lose the second game. But like you said, Pat, they definitely deserved a bit more from that game, because especially in the third period, they really, really started to take it to Montreal. The Sens just dropped 2 against the Oilers, but again, really took it to the Edmonton Oilers in a couple of those games and held McDavid and Draisaitl to a combined 2 points in that entire little series. So, Ottawa's taking steps in the right direction, but like you said, Pat, you're probably still expecting, if you're Montreal, and at this point, seeing how well Toronto is playing, you need to take both of those games if you're the Montreal, no matter what changes the Senators are making to the lineup.
Yep. And let's talk about something that for some reason is it's very difficult to talk about on Habs Twitter and in Habs land, and that is Carey Price, Jake Allen, and the quote unquote goaltender controversy in Montreal. I don't think there's a goaltender controversy. I don't know what's so controversial about playing the goalie who has better stats than another goalie. I don't think it should be a hot take. I don't think it's anti-Carey Price to suggest that. I don't think it's anything personal with Carey Price, but for whatever reason, people get really upset on Twitter when you make that claim. I don't think Carey Price is why Montreal is losing. I don't think Carey Price is why they struggled against Toronto or why they struggled against in both or one of the games against Ottawa. However, he hasn't been very good. The stats reflect it. This map reflects it. Jake Allen is up there in Markstrom, Vasilevsky territory. Price is near Koskinen, sort of near Matt Murray territory, or if that's Hoberg, whatever. He's not playing well. And after last night, Toronto played. Also, I don't know if you guys watched last night's game. I thought both teams were very meh. I thought it was
wasn't a great game.
Game given how the first one went. Do you guys think there's a goaltender controversy in Montreal? Should there be? Are you guys leaning towards continuing to play Price to let him figure it out, or you know what, maybe play Jake Allen a little bit?
It's tough. And like most things, most hypotheticals this year, it's a short season, so it's hard to say. But having a goaltending controversy when one of your goalies, and I know a name is just a name, but when one of your goalies is Carey Price and you're having a goaltending controversy, is it the worst thing in the world? Maybe not. But I think it's like you said, it's pretty straightforward. Play your better goalie, especially in a shortened season. There isn't really time to give Carey Price a few games to figure it out. And he's going to get games anyways because of how condensed the schedule is. So you should be treating Carey Price like your backup right now, which isn't the worst thing in the world. And if he starts playing better, then that's not a bad thing. So I don't know. I think it's a pretty straightforward answer.
Yeah, I think for the first time, it's really some sort of a quote unquote controversy because, where in the past, Carey Price, could play sort of poorly, and he has definitely at times over the past few years play poorly, but really still be the best option and therefore not have anybody really breathing down his neck. But now he's got Jake Allen, a comfortable NHL goaltender who has thrived in tandems throughout his career and is thriving in this tandem right now without the pressure of being the starter. And that's sort of creating the controversy because finally Carey Price has solid competition in the wings behind him, vying for more playing time. And I think that's what's creating the controversy here.
Yeah, and I'm not, again, it just because Twitter was how Twitter is last night. Price is 4-2-2, and Allen is 4-1-0. Allen has a .940 save percentage, of 1.8 goals against average. Price has a 2.8 goals against average and 8.96 save percentage. It shouldn't be controversial to play the more effective player when the margin is this big. Again, I'm not looking at these 3 games and blaming it on Price, but the fact that Montreal is finally playing well, Price shouldn't have to stand on his head, but it's just these goals here and there. And Nick, I love the Stützle goal was nice, but I really thought he should have had that. Yep. I thought that was a stoppable puck. And it's just even the Trevor Moore goal, Trevor Moore, you're sniping that from outside of the circle. Also, Philip Deneau can get his stick there. So anyway, I just think I'll pose
Trevor
the question.
Moore plays for LA.
Not Trevor Moore. I don't know why I get them mixed up. Travis Dermott. Sorry.
Dermott. There we go.
I get the 2 mixed up. I don't know why. Anyway, but yeah. So I'm gonna ask you guys this, and then we can move on. Montreal plays tonight against Edmonton, hopefully at 8 p.m., and then they play Saturday against Toronto again. Do you split starts? Allen's playing tonight no matter what. Do you do Allen tonight? And if he plays really well, do you play him again on Saturday, or do you do Price Saturday no matter what?
I think if Allen plays well tonight, play him on Saturday. I don't know what their schedule is after that. I don't know how busy they are, but yeah.
It's a short season. You got to ride the hot hand. I would go, if Allen plays well tonight, you got to keep going Allen just because it's the hot hand. Ottawa's been doing it with Matt Murray now. He's gotten hot the last few games, and you just continue to play the guy. Use up the good play because it's a short season, and Montreal needs wins right now to stay in the race with Toronto.
Yeah, interesting time in Montreal. I hope Price, and this is just the way Price is. He starts slow and then he gets better. I don't think this is the goaltender Carey Price is. We saw it with Pittsburgh last year and with against Philly. So that's it for kind of my team, my frustration. I hope he figures it out. I hope he can get playing better. And again, I'm not putting this on him, but again, he's not above criticism, and no player should be. So anyway, Luke, your Canucks, they've struggled. They went 0-3 against Toronto. I'm not making fun of you. I'm not making fun of the Canucks.
Yeah, you
but
are.
It's kind of,
you are.
kind of him. It hasn't been good, and Benning
No.
out has been trending a little bit. Our good friend Lucas is not having a good time, and you're not having a good time. But I just don't think you're as vocal about it.
I have not. I've just I've stopped really caring.
You've come to
pretty
terms
early in
Yeah.
the season, I think, to do that, but that's where we are. And you get the vibe from the team that they're not caring either. I put so much emphasis on it last year, how well they were gelling, and I keep talking about that. But I'm just going to recite a few quotes here from people involved in the team. From Captain Bo Horvat: I don't think we should be rebuilding at all, and I don't think we are rebuilding. I definitely don't want to go through that again. Our season is still not over by any means. There's still lots of hockey to be played. So it's in his mind for sure. Travis Green. Green was asked if he misses guys like Markstrom, Tanev, Toffoli, Stetcher. I'm not going to talk about guys that aren't here right now. And a big one from Quinn Hughes. He said this kind of in passing: we have a lot of new pieces. We lost a lot of players from last year. Elias Pettersson said something similar, and I can't find the exact quote, but they're definitely thinking about it. The offseason did not go well. I'm also fully on the Fire Benning train. It
hasn't helped that Hughes or Pettersson have not been playing their best hockey either, and that really hasn't done much to help cover up. I was the one in this in this show that predicted from the season's onset that I thought the Canucks were going to be in Ottawa Senators territory.
Yeah,
and
I thought they were going to be in Toronto Maple Leafs territory. So.
Yeah, they technically aren't in Ottawa Senators territory because that's a whole other level of that. But the Canucks aren't being even propped up by the play of Hughes and Pettersson. They've both taken a considerable step back from where they were last season, which, not a lot of people predicted. And I think now the lack of depth that they have is really being exposed in this. And yeah, I can see why fans and players aren't happy.
And that's the thing with Pettersson is Pettersson's been scoring goals. When he gets the puck, he's still dangerous, but he's not that level that we saw like last year. He would try
the
stuff.
Whole team is
just the whole team.
Off.
Although, Hughes especially, who Nick and I spoke at end about how he was better defensively than Cale Makar, and he was better all around than Cale Makar. Flip the switch. That guy is not defending in the slightest, and it's just. I find the Canucks entertaining. I wouldn't say this. I'll say this just once or however many times I've said it, but I try not to say it. But I do find the Canucks entertaining when they're at their best. When you get to see Pettersson, Miller, Hughes, Besser, it's a lot of fun.
Their power play is fun to watch. Still, thank goodness. But
yeah. All right. Well, that's unless there's anything on Sens, Nick. Anything you want to touch on?
No, we pretty much covered it with the Montreal stuff.
All right. Well, that just about does it for our episode here of Take to Take. Lots of stuff, lots of news, more hockey tonight. Montreal, Edmonton, Montreal, Toronto. Luke, do the Canucks play tonight?
Calgary, 10 p.m.
And Ottawa, they play?
Yeah, Winnipeg, 8 p.m.
Perfect. Lots of hockey, and hopefully it continues. And again, thanks so much for tuning in. We'll see you next week. Take care.